It continues to be the single most important fact of American political life that the largest portion of American voters in recent American history, if not ever, no longer trust any of the core central institutions of authority and power in the United States. And that is, if you think about it, an extremely poor state of affairs for any society. We need reliable and trustworthy institutions to administer the law, to create the appearance that the law is being administered fairly and equally, to issue decrees in times of war or in times of medical crises that people can place their faith and trust in, and just in general to have a working set of facts that are given to us by the media that we believe are true. The citizenry needs that. It benefits from having a set of institutions that it can trust. And by and large, in American history, people have largely supported those institutions, whether they identify as Republicans or Democrats, whether on the left or the right. Obviously, there are lots of exceptions. There's been distrust in American history, but in general, the vast majority of American citizens have placed their faith and trust in leading institutions of media, of law enforcement, of science and health, and that has all collapsed. And it collapsed more or less coinciding with the emergence of Donald Trump, though I don't think he was the cause of it. I think he was one of the people who first perceived how great of a sentiment this was in the American populace, and he gave voice to it. He became what he said he wanted to be, which was the vessel for the forgotten person, the person who perceives that these institutions have abandoned them, that they only care about a tiny sliver of the population. Now, one of the remarkable things about 2024 and the presidential race that we just started with the Iowa caucus last night is that we have a situation we have never previously had in American politics, ever, in the history of this country. The candidate that is leading essentially all polls, but now I think it's safe to say he is the front runner for the presidency, is not only facing 4 criminal processes, separate cases in 4 separate jurisdictions where he's accused of felonies in each and every one of them, but he has been formally indicted and faces the very real prospect of prison, not 10 years from now or 5 years from now, but this year. These cases are going to trial. And they're not going to go to trial until many of these states have voted. And what it looks very likely, based on the results last night, is that we're going to have a situation where huge numbers of people, millions and millions of Americans, by a very large margin, are making very clear, crystal clear, unmistakably clear, that the person they want to be their president is Donald Trump. And after months of watching this, Jack Smith and the prosecutors in Atlanta and in Manhattan are going to march into courtrooms and they're going to argue that that same person should be put in prison. If there's any recipe for unrest, civic unrest, I can't imagine what would be better, if that were your goal, than watching all these races and all these elections and hearing the outcome of all these people going to vote and then taking the person they want to make their president and doing everything possible to imprison him and kick him off ballots and render him ineligible to run. I actually watched that happen in Brazil twice. In 2018, when Lula da Silva was the front runner in polls, and he was arrested and made ineligible, and that's what paved the way for Jair Bolsonaro to win that race. He might have won anyway, Bolsonaro, but the polls were showing Lula in front. And then once Lula won, ever since that election, Bolsonaro being his main political opponent, he has now been declared ineligible to run in the next election, and they're trying to imprison him as well. And it's a recipe for extreme unrest. We saw a little glimpse of it in Brazil. We've seen a little glimpse of it in the United States with January 8th in Brazil, January 6th in the United States, but so much worse will come if we continue down this path. But the remarkable part about it is that even though he's been indicted 4 separate times, he not only is maintaining his political support, he has clearly increased it. He has clearly consolidated all the support he had and then gained more. And if you think about what that says, what that necessarily says, it is actually kind of frightening if you care about political stability in your country. But it's also very well deserved. What it's saying is that we know that the Justice Department and various prosecutors are accusing Donald Trump of being a felon and are trying to put him in prison. But it doesn't affect our opinion of him and his fitness to be the president because we don't trust those institutions to administer the law. We don't believe in the Justice Department. We don't believe in the FBI. We don't believe in prosecutors in this country. We believe that those institutions of power have been weaponized, have been commandeered, have been corrupted. And there is no way to read the outcome of this election thus far, even last night's vote, which you can dismiss as being a caucus, only one state, which is Iowa. All that's true, but Trump didn't even win Iowa in 2016. He was over 50% of the vote. He won by 30 points, even though tens and tens of millions of dollars were first poured into Ron DeSantis and then into Nikki Haley. It did nothing. People have tuned out establishment voices. That is the only conclusion you can reach. And if you're like me and you believe those establishment sectors and those establishment institutions are deeply corrupted, then in one way you should be celebratory about that fact, that they really have lost the faith and trust of almost everybody other than partisan Democrats, the only ones who trust these institutions. But if you also value civic stability and just a general peace in the body politic, it should be something very concerning. Generally, good things do not happen once people lose faith in their institutions of authority and they no longer trust that authority is being exercised legitimately. Now, this is the New York Times trying to grapple with the fact that they have been spending 7 years now, every day almost, warning everybody that Trump is a criminal, that Trump is controlled by Russia, that Trump is corrupt, that he's a fascist, that he's a white nationalist, that he's a racist. The New York Times just editorialized yesterday. We showed you that it's the moral duty of every citizen to do everything possible to stop Trump. And they ignored the New York Times, of course, and went to the polls in massive numbers, never before seen numbers, and voted for the person that the establishment told them not to vote for. And so here's the New York Times trying to mock and minimize this connection because they can't understand it, they can't control it, so they want to deride it and turn it into something nefarious. This connection, says the New York Times, a hard-earned bond for some, a cult of personality to others, has unleashed one of the most durable forces in American politics. Now, the reason why this is such a sad effort on the part of the New York Times to mock this Trump movement that they cannot control and cannot understand 8 years after they first elected, or 6 years after they first elected Trump president, is because it isn't just Trump supporters. If it were only Trump supporters, he would be winning 35% of the vote. He would have 30% of the vote in polls. And yet, it's not just inside the Republican Party, but in the American electorate at large, where huge numbers of people are prepared to vote for Donald Trump in 2024. And these institutions of authority, like the New York Times, that speak for them, should be saying to themselves, we've been saying this for so many years as poll after poll after poll shows a collapse of faith and trust in American media institutions. They ought to be doing some self-reflection about this. They ought to be saying, what is it that we have done to lose the trust and faith of so many people, to make arguably the majority of the country deeply hate us and distrust us? What is it that we've done to contribute to this and to cause this? And people who work inside the U.S. government, inside the security state, should be asking, why is it that we are so hated and distrusted, we the FBI, we the Justice Department, we the U.S. security state, that if we accuse somebody of being a felon, something that used to destroy their political viability, instantly, it now seems to strengthen them among most voters. But instead of engaging in that self-reflection, which is what a healthy institution of authority would do, a healthy power center would do, they're instead lashing out and blaming the people who refuse to obey them. They're a cult figure, they're cult followers. Trump uses them, he entertains them, he deceives them, they're stupid, he mocks, he misleads them, he convinces them that we at the New York Times aren't trustworthy. That's all they're left to do is lash out. They know they're losing control. They have done, what else can they do to Donald Trump? And they just watched him, after everything they've done, all the money they poured into this race, get a 30-point victory never before seen in modern political history in a contested Iowa caucus. Here is the New York Times, the new NBC News rather, in July of 2023, with polling data on how Americans view the FBI and the DOJ. The title was Americans Sour on the FBI and DOJ Amid Trump Investigations. A new NBC News poll found that Americans' attitudes toward the Department of Justice and FBI are not positive. Quote, views of the agency have soured since October 2018, when 52% of Americans had a positive opinion of the FBI and just 18% had a negative opinion. That was as recently as 2018, 52-18 in favor of the FBI. This month's negative numbers are buoyed by Republicans. Among GOP voters, just 17% have a positive view of the FBI, while 56% have a negative view. And again, they try and say it's because the FBI is uncovering crimes of Trump. The media, of course, is on the side of Democrats. That's why only Democrats trust them. And that was the polling data, and that was the setup. And we've shown you the polling data for many years showing that only Democrats trust the FBI, the CIA, the security state. Here's the evidence about them trusting media corporations and only Democrats trusting media corporations, which means these media corporations speak for and to only Democrats. And in all 6 of those key swing states, with the exception of Wisconsin, Trump has now had a lead for at least 2 months over Biden in every one of those states, which shows you that it's not just the Republican Party and MAGA voters and Trump voters, but voters across the spectrum that, at least for now, are saying they want Donald Trump to be president, not only despite the fact that he's been indicted 4 times, but in large number because of that. And I don't think it can be overestimated, overstated, overdiscussed how very revealing that is and very disturbing that is of the way in which these U.S. Institutions of authority, because of their own misconduct, because of their own corruption, because of their own deceit, have justifiably lost the faith and trust of most of the American population. Only American liberals, only Democrats trust these institutions. The rest of the country doesn't, and it is a huge problem for them as they try and put roadblocks in front of Donald Trump on his way back to the White House.